Hi everyone, this is our lesson on one-step equations, which I know we did start to work on a little bit before our break, but I wanted to review it before we moved on. So how do we solve one-step equations? We use inverse operations. What you're going to need for this lesson is your notebook and a pen, or a pencil. So if you don't have that in front of you, go grab that right now. Okay, so let's take a look at our two example problems here. We have two one-step equations. These are one-step equations because there is only one operation in each equation. This is a subtraction problem, and this 6x, that's multiplication. So let's look at x minus 27 equals 148. This equation is saying that there's some number out there, and when we subtract 27, we're left with 148. If this is subtraction, we have to ask ourselves, what's the inverse? The inverse of subtraction would be addition. We would be adding 27 to both sides. So when I add 148 plus 27, that's going to tell us what x equals. So we add these. $175. So that means that x equals 175. That's our answer. Now over here we have 6x equals 84. Like we said before, this is multiplication. What's the inverse? It's division. So that means we're going to have to divide by 6. So we're going to be doing 84 divided by 6 to figure out what x equals. 84 divided by 6. If you don't know that off the top of your head, that's okay. You can do it off on the side. Sorry, my pen is a little, my handwriting isn't super great here, but you get the idea. And our answer is 14. So x equals 14. That's how we solve the one-step equation. Now, of course, we need to go back and check our answers. How do we do that? Well, we plug whatever answer we got right back in there. So we figured out that x equals 175. So if this is the right answer, that means when we plug it back in here, 175 minus 27 should equal 148. Let's find out. 175 minus 27, and that should give us the answer of 148. And it does, so we got the correct answer. Same thing with this problem. We figured out that x equals 14, so if I plug that 14 back up in here where the x is, that means that 6 times 14 should equal 84. So let's do that multiplication to just make sure that we did it correctly. 14 times 6, put down the 4, carry the 2. Perfect, we got the answer 84. So yep, we did both of these problems correctly. So let's do a little bit of practice with one-step equations. What I want you to do right now is pause the video, copy down these 4 problems, and try them on your own. When you're ready, hit play so that you can check your answers. Okay, so you should have done these problems by now. So let's double check our work. I'm going to try to type to see if that's a little bit easier. So for the first problem, we have 2x equals 156. This is multiplication. So what are we doing? We're going to divide 156 divided by 2. And after you do your division, you should get that 156 divided by 2 equals 78. So our answer here is x equals 78. This next equation right here, this is division. So the inverse of division is multiplication. So you should have multiplied, we should have multiplied 13 times 5. And if you did that correctly, you would get that the answer is x equals 65. Okay, so now down here, even though these are decimals, we're still doing inverse operation. X minus 48.3 equals 5.72. Because this is subtraction, you should have done the inverse and added. Make sure that when you add, you are lining up your decimal point, like so. If you want to add a placeholder 0 here, that is fine. So when you added these two numbers, let's put my addition here. I'm going to type. You should have gotten that 48.3 plus 5.72 equals 54.02. Over here, we have 4.2 times x equals 14.7. So you should have done the inverse operation, which is division in this problem. So to set this up, we do 14.7 divided by 4.2. And what do we have to remember to do here? Oh yes, move that decimal point over, because 4.2 is not a whole number yet. So we move it over one time, now it's a whole number, which means we move it over one time here, and our decimal point goes right up here. So 42 goes into 147 3 times. And we can subtract that. What do we do now? We add a 0 after our decimal, and we bring it down. And we would see that 42 goes into 210 exactly 5 times. So for this one, x equals 35. So now, of course, if we wanted to double check our answers, we would re-plug in that x value. So for here, I would put 78 right up in here and do 2 times 78 to make sure it works. I would put 65 up in here to make sure it works. That 65 divided by 5 equals 13. Over here, I could put 54.02 minus 48.3, and that would give me 5.72. And for the last one, I would plug this in so that I would be doing 4.2 times 3.5 to make sure it equals 14.7. Okay, we're going to do 4 more practice problems. Whoop, there they are. So once again, right now I want you to pause this video to copy down these 4 problems and to give them a try on your own. And when you're done, you can replay the video to make sure that you got the answers correct. Please be careful of the fractions and think about the rules with fractions as you're working. Okay, pause. Ready, set, go. Okay, so now that you've done these problems, let's talk about the answers. So for this first one, we have x divided by 12.1 equals 5. Well, the inverse of division is multiplication. So you should have multiplied 12.1 times 5. And if you did that, you would get that x equals 60.5. Okay, so what we did there was, I'll write it out, 12.1 times 5, because we are doing the inverse operation. Now over here for our next problem, we have x minus 4/5 equals 7/10. This is subtraction, so what do? We add. We're going to add 7/10 plus 4/5. But what do we have to fix about this problem first? Oh yeah, when we add fractions, we need to have a common denominator. So in this case, the least common denominator would be 10. So if I multiply this fraction times 2, I would see that this is really, let's do this, 8 over 10. 4/5, if I multiply it by 2, is the same thing as 8/10. Now I can add. And we're going to get the answer. that x equals 7/10 plus 8/10, 15/10. And of course we can simplify that. That is the same thing. If I divide them by 5, that's the same thing as 3/2. If you want to write that as a mixed number, you can. It would be 1 1/2. But 3/2 is fine as well. All right, down here, these are the tricky ones that you all love. We have 2/5 times x equals 3/10. Well, this is multiplication. So what are we going to do? We're going to divide. We're going to go backwards. 3/10 divided by 2/5 to figure out what x is. So let's write that down. 3/10 divided by 2/5. What do we use to divide fractions? Keep, change, flip, or SIR. So we're going to do 3/10 times 5/2. So if I multiply these straight across, I get 15/20. And of course, we can simplify that by dividing by 5, and we would get 3/4. So in this problem, x equals 3/4. And if you don't believe me, go back and check your work by plugging 3/4 in right up here. Do 2/5 times 3/4, and you will get the answer 3/10. And for our last problem, x divided by 7, because we know that this fraction is the same thing as division. X divided by 7 equals 3/5. The inverse of division would be multiplying. So we are going to do 3/5 times 7. And 7 is the same thing as 7/1. So when I multiply these, we get 21/5. And this cannot be simplified. You can turn it into a mixed number if you want, but you do not have to. If you turn it into a mixed number, it would be 4 1/5.